everyone's favorite game. Where in the world is Giulio Caravatta? Are you in Kamloops? Are you quarantining? What's going on
No,
right
no.
now?
I am not in quarantine. Thank God. I am double vaccinated and I'm not
Nice.
in Kamloops. We're not allowed to actually be in Kamloops.
Really?
Yeah, no, the first week is completely off limits. So
Interesting. See, I wondered what teams would do with that. I wasn't sure if it was going to be team control because I mean, you and I understand it as being members of the media game that we can see it from both sides where it's like, well, obviously we'd like to be there and give people information on the teams and the background and the
mhm.
matchups and the training camp battles. But at the same time, it's like this has given teams a weird opportunity to be able to monopolize and exclusively be able to tell the story of the first week of camp. I saw Chris Hoffley from the Ottawa Redblacks tweeting out, like, no fans allowed in attendance. I'm not sure what their media situation is, but he was saying that if, you want anything to do with training camp, go to the Red Black social media page. And I was thinking, man,
Yeah,
that's an interesting opportunity for those people to be able to take that and make that the home of everything that their fans want, isn't it?
absolutely. And you know that there's a ton of people out there that are interested, right? That have missed the game and are going to want information. So you're right. This is a really good opportunity for those teams to really engage people on their website and give them an opportunity and say, hey, this is really good. I'm going to keep coming back here.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a real good opportunity for them to to engage the fans. I know that people here are interested, but here's the double whammy here in British Columbia is that where the Lions are having training camp is so most people, if you don't know where Kamloops is here in relation to Vancouver, it's about 2.5 hours, 3 hours north of here. But with all the wildfires going on, Kamloops has had some issues, and they were talking about the air quality control up there as being potentially going to be very bad. So talk about you having to deal everything with the pandemic and having to deal with the quarantine and the vaccines and all that kind of stuff. Now you throw in the fact now that they might have to battle the air quality up there in order to get some practices. So I'm sure that they're they were probably in a ton of Zoom meetings anyways, but now with all this, there's got to be a plan B, right? You got to have a plan to potentially deal with the idea of not being able to practice for a few days, because if the wind shifts up there with everything that's going on in the interior and the wildfires, it could make things very, very bad for the team, and in the sense that they won't be able to practice.
Yeah, and it is scary because I've been in Alberta before where, like you say, one day it's clear, the next day the wind shifts, and if there's wildfires in BC or otherwise, and it comes over the top of the mountains there, then all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's a completely different world. And obviously everybody knows that lives in those parts, that whether it's the air advisories or if it's, stay at home, it's all those things that you thought you were done with having to stay locked inside, and now the players might
Yeah.
be locked inside for a whole different reason. You're right, it's crazy, but again, it's kind of the nature of a lot of issues stacking on top of each other that I don't think that we were necessarily at fault for a whole lot of what happened with the COVID stuff. But you could make the argument, Julio, as you know, that we might be at fault for some of the forest fire stuff.
Yeah, that's true. But it's interesting you say that because there's obviously a lot of news on that. But here too, like the interior, they're seeing some bad thunderstorms, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of those big ones are being attributed to the lightning. But like you say, a lot of it is man-made too. So, but man, oh man, this is a scary time here in this province with the wildfires, and hopefully we can get some rain and get them under control, because as dry as it's been out here, hopefully they can contain all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's turn our attention towards the team itself, the BC Lions. Exciting, obviously, to get back into the swing of things and have a training camp, get back on the field. But what is your sense of the fan base right now? Because the conversation always, and again, it did this week, where Tim McAuliffe was talking about, put your money where your mouth is, people that didn't want the
Yeah.
XFL to be involved in any of this stuff. And it's the big metropolitan centers that get thrown in the conversation. It's always BC, Toronto, Montreal. And it seems like
Yeah.
Toronto gets a lot of the discussion. Montreal has the new ownership. That gets a lot of attention. BC always feels like it's playing third fiddle, even in the discussion about the three metropolitan centers that are struggling. So I want from you, someone who actually understands the area and the fan base a little bit, where is this fan base at, and what is this team's relationship to the community at right now?
Well, I think that, there are the core fans here in Vancouver. There's no question. There are the diehards that are going to come out, and that's your 15 to 20,000 fans that love the game. To me, Marshall, you know what the biggest issue for me in this city is, and it will continue to be, is the stadium. I mean, that's a big hurdle to overcome here. People, it's Vancouver. There's a lot of options for people in the summertime to be able to go out and, go for a walk on the seawall, go do this, go do that. Going inside that stadium, even though they have now a little bit of an opening, it's still not, conducive to, being outside. Like I think about what Hamilton has and what Ottawa has, like that, the idea of you have those end zones with where the bands are playing and there's a young crowd out there, they're drinking beer, they're having, it's social. It's not, there's a football game going on, but it gives them the opportunity to really socialize as well. And we just don't have that here. And it's one of the things that I think that really needs to happen is that they need to be able to engage that younger generation. As I said, if the team does well, and they go out and catch fire and start really, really well, you're going to get 25,000 people in that stadium. But at the same time, those people love it, but it's also, they're looking around going, Jesus, it's half empty here. It's a 60,000 seat stadium pretty much. And you got the whole it's just not an atmosphere. Right. And that's something that we desperately need. And I know that it's going to be an expensive fix. And I know that that's probably pretty far reaching, but I know that football can thrive. I know that the amateur game, the high school game is alive and well here. I'm coaching high school football in here in Coquitlam, and I know that the kids are interested, right? They're the grassroots level. It's there. There's people interested in playing football. Now it's just translating and getting those kids, into the stadiums and watching the games.
It's wild to think that you can be inside a stadium and say, well, the culture and the environment isn't really there, when you could walk 300, 400 meters maybe and hop on a paddleboard and go underneath the Granville Island Bridge. Like I did that before a game a couple years ago because of the time change. So damn long for people from the East coming out West, where I wake up at 2 a.m. I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't know. Let me get on a paddleboard for 5 hours before the game and just go out and get some exercise. So, which by the way, I ended up making my way from BC Place out towards the seawall, which I had a great time, super relaxed, went all the way out there, turned around. It took twice as hard coming back. It was twice as hard to paddle. And I was like, I've made a terrible mistake. Obviously, I have no idea how the water works here.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. Hey, that's happened to me before. You're right. It's so beautiful. And all of a sudden the wind changes or the tide changes. And all of a sudden you're working your ass off just to get back.
Yeah. And I was like, I have to call a game.
Though.
It was amazing, but I'm going, if I don't paddle hard enough, there's no broadcast today, because that was the game that Michael Reilly was actually at the CBL's championship weekend. So I was calling the game solo. I was doing pre-post, halftime, color, and play-by-play on radio. And I'm like, if I don't get off this paddleboard in time, something very bad is going to happen. So of course you're just paddling with fear and going as hard as you possibly can. But yeah, it's such a beautiful spot. And to think that all of that is so close and there's so much to be accessed, because there are so many teams in the CFL, I believe personally, without actually talking to, their presidents and CEOs, that would just die to have an environment like that spot in that city where there's so much happening and there's so many different things to be able. It's like, how do you turn that from being a negative where people say, well, I want to go do this, not that? And how do you turn it into a positive where people say, well, I want to go do that as part of the experience of being down there? Because there's teams that like Ottawa is taking advantage of that. Definitely.
And that's what I was just about to say. That kind of experience, like where Ottawa Stadium is the kind of situation they need to create here. And the other part of that too is like the Whitecaps are in the same situation, right? They need to be able to create that kind of atmosphere, because if they could, then you're going to get people as far as going down to an event, whether it's football or soccer. You're outside, you're having a good time, the band's going, and all of a sudden when the game's over, you can walk downtown and keep it going, right? But you got to get those people in the stadium. And that's the problem here. I find is that stadium is just, it's not conducive to that intimacy that all around the league seems to be creating with their games. And I look at Hamilton, and that's a perfect example. When you're there, you see all the fans kind of lingering outside all the tailgating, and then they come inside in that whole end zone. We just don't have anything near that here. And that's what they need to create.
Interesting. Yeah, certainly a challenge for them going forward, but lots of ideas, I'm sure, being thrown around. And I'm sure that the new ownership group, when it is founded, that will be a probably number 1A on there to figure out how to engage those fans for sure.
Absolutely.
The other question I want to ask you here off the top that I'm sure you get it everywhere you go, but I love your eye for the game. You know this. I always gush on whether it's radio or talking to you off the air, just the idea of being able to talk X's and O's and style and characteristics of offenses and everything else with you. And the way that Michael now, sorry,
Yes.
laughed off in the introductory press conference for the year, the protection issues of 2019. I was like, good on him. Good on Michael for doing that, because that's the right approach to take, and believing in your guys. And yes, the coaching staff changing over and all the rest. But how do they go into this year feeling so comfortable knowing that so many of the guys did come back? Is it because they were banged up, the offensive line throughout the year? Is it because the coaching staff has changed over? Is it because Reilly now understands what's in front of him better after the first year? What do you think is giving him that comfort and ability to joke about it and move forward?
Well, I think one of the things is that that's Michael's personality, right? He's a leader, and he's going to try to deflect that and not make it a big issue. But I think also, Marshall, by the way, I really enjoy our talks too about that, the X's and O's part. I mean, it's always great to talk to somebody who's got a passion for the game like yourself. But I think in BC's case, I think a few things. I think they probably figured out a little bit on how to use Suk Chung a little bit better. I mean, he had a difficult transition here. Then he got hurt. But I think getting him healthy and getting him involved in the system, Suk was a dominant, guard in this league when he was with Winnipeg. I think they're hoping that they can create that, back again. Getting Riker Matthews, I don't have to tell you, he's a solid offensive lineman who's played in this league, has had success in this league. You get him at right tackle. You've got veterans going across the board, with Hunter Stewart and Joel Figueroa, and then Peter Godber and Philip Norman going to be battling up front at that center position. They're pretty solid across board. But I will say the one biggest part of this whole equation is Kelly Bates. Mm-hmm. When the coaching change was made from Brian Chu to Kelly Bates, it just seemed the chemistry seemed to really start to work, that his coaching style really started to resonate with those guys, and they really started to become a different group. That group that started out the year and the group that ended the year, they were very, very different. They really started to find their groove towards the end of the year. But I think having Kelly here for the whole time, I think that, like I said, the personnel across the board, as it is right now, unless someone kind of jumps right out of you at training camp, it is a pretty solid group going into the season. So I think Mike's probably got a reason to be optimistic about how things look going forward.
How hard is it going to be for all of us to stop saying Mike?
I know. I better not. I usually bet Moj with some wings if we screw up a name. I better not do that, because that could really be bad. We could be pounding back hundreds of wings. So yeah, it's going to take some time getting used to that.
It's tough, but again, I admire the reason why he made the change. I think everybody does, right? And they understand that it was his mom's request. So it's one of those things that, again, just reveals the character of Michael Reilly, and everything that we've known about him as a player for a long time just gets reinforced tenfold once again. But what style of offense do you think this team will take on this year based on the talent that you see on the roster going into camp?
Well, I think bringing Shaq Cooper in, I think gives him that kind of dynamic runner who not only can run the ball, who's got quick feet, but also the ability to, get him out of the backfield. But let's not kid ourselves. What makes Mike Reilly so good is his ability to push the ball vertically, right? So, they want to be a big strike capability team. It's going to be interesting, Brian Burnham is Brian Burnham. Lamar Durant's Lamar Durant. Those two guys, are going to be the constants. But to me, it's going to be that third receiver, the Dominic Grimes, the Lucky Whitehead, those kinds of guys. How are they going to fit in to the offense? Because we know that, he's going to be successful if you give him time. He's just too good. He can read a defense, he can get rid of the football. You give him enough time, he's going to hurt you. I think they want to be a little bit more of a big strike type team. I think they want to be able to push the ball vertically and have that threat that if you do start to press them, that they can go away from Brian Burnham, because he's going to be the guy who's going to draw all the attention. So those other guys need to be able to contribute. And if they can, like I think they can, I think they're going to be dangerous offensively. You have a veteran quarterback in this league who can read defenses and who has a ton of success. That given time, he's going to be successful.
I've always been interested by Michael Reilly's relationship with Brian Burnham in that first year, especially thinking about it here through the last basically year and a half, in that, you know this, Julia, when you have a receiver that's that talented, that dominant, and can be that productive in the right situation, there's a tendency to lean on that guy too much at times. Like he's a magnet for everything. I don't know where else to go. Let me just force the ball in. And all of a sudden you start throwing bad interceptions and you start throwing the ball where you shouldn't and off timing and off script. And he never did that. Reilly never did that with Burnham in 2019, despite the protection issues. It never felt like it was forced. Somehow that relationship still stayed organic and productive, despite the fact that there was just tornadoes and earthquakes swirling around him at all times in the pocket. And to me, that just screams, well, if he does get protection, what could that actually be? Because the fact that didn't look bad between the two of them or forced between the two of them in 2019 it might be one of the most surprising things of that entire season, to be honest.
Yeah. No, you make a very good point. And you there's just, I don't have to explain it to you because I know you've probably experienced this where you have a guy where you just, you just trust what he sees is what you see. And I think that's one of the things that really kind of, they hit it off right away. And I think they were also with Lamar Durant that you saw his kind of career year happening, and then he got hurt.
Yeah.
You saw that, he came a long way with understanding, and then he really relied on those two guys. But at the same time, there was no one else out there that was really, not that there was no one else out there. He didn't have the time to create, a relationship with anybody else because he knew, especially early on, that, he had to be able to make a read and throw it because he wasn't going to have the time. So I would suspect that relationship between those guys, and every team has it, right? You got to have those interior guys that you trust, that you believe in what they see is what you see, and your ability to deliver the football in certain spots before they even get there is the key. And then if you throw in a third guy, and sometimes when it's really magic, you throw in a fourth guy.
Yeah.
And Hamilton has been like that, right? You mean I don't have to tell you, you start creating an atmosphere with 3 or 4 guys and that chemistry, then that's when you get dangerous, real dangerous. So that's the hope here. They feel really good about what they have. And I know they feel really good about a couple of the guys that they're bringing in, but at the same time, 97 guys or 100 guys, how many guys are going to bring in? There's going to be some guys that are going to be, that may surprise us, that we've heard so much about, that aren't going to pan out. But that's the best part about training camp, and seeing how some of these guys emerge and develop. And maybe we're talking about, the next Brian Burnham coming out of this receiving core. So yeah, a lot of good reasons to be optimistic here.
Yeah, no doubt. And I also, when you're talking about having 3 receivers, and when it gets really special, it's when 4 guys step up. It reminds me of, I think, the most dangerous, well-rounded attack that we've seen is 2017, probably in Ottawa, maybe 2018 as well. But the idea of having, Chris Williams or Deontay Spencer over the top, Ellingson into the field side, Sinopoli working between zones in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
And it was Ernest Jackson one year, and then another year they were going with, it was just, there were so many different levels of the defense that they could attack. And now I'm looking at Elizondo and Trevor Harris in Edmonton with the Elks, and I'm thinking to myself, like, they've obviously got Darrell Walker and Greg Ellingson. Those guys have to hit 1,000 yards in order for them to have success. I fully expect that. And my question is, do you think Armonte Edwards or Tavon Smith can get up towards that 1,000-yard mark? Because I'm trying to figure out what that's going to look. Are they just going to be 2-man heavy with Darrell and Ellingson and nobody can stop them with those two? Or are they going to do the Trevor Harris thing with Elizondo they did in Ottawa, where it's like, oh no, we're just going to pick you apart in 17 different ways?
I think that's exactly. And the thing is too, is that he's shown too, he's another guy that he knows what he's looking at.
Yeah.
Right. He's getting rid of the football real quick. And that makes it, when you have a guy who, delivers the football so quickly, right, it's very frustrating. And he seems to really know where he's going before that snap. And it's when you have that kind of talent, it's hard to stop, right? Like we always say that, and I know that we always say that here in BC when we play Calgary with Bo Levi. When you get quarterbacks who reach a certain level of experience and talent, how do you stop them, right? And then I think the bottom line is this, is that you have to be really productive up front. You have to have the ability to change it up, to give him multiple looks, and to get into his face quickly. And if you don't, and you allow these guys to get some rhythm and start really kind of understanding what you're doing, then you might as well just hold on and hope to God something bad happens, because you're just going to sit back and watch these guys go do their work because they're just too good. So, and all these guys, like you look at Bo, you look at Trevor, you look at Michael, and the guy I'm interested in seeing how he kind of rebounds and is Cody Fajardo. What happens with him, right? He had an outstanding, beginning of his career. And then all of a sudden now, he's going to be the guy, all eyes are going to be on him. So in the West with all those quarterbacks, it's going to be who comes out of the gate quickest and the fastest. And if they can do that, it should be a real fun year in the West for sure.
Yeah. And the thing that I love about the West this year, Giulio, going into it, is that we talk about Michael Reilly and Bo Levi and classic matchup, and they've had so many duels with each other. And Trevor's out there now; he's got Elizondo helping him out. He's got all these receivers he can throw it to, and man, Fajardo, that's a talented team. And the guy we never talk about, the guy who just won the Grey Cup, like Zach Collaros in 20, right? And I'm guilty of it too. I always do that where I'm like, oh yeah, Zach's in Winnipeg, and he just won the Grey Cup, and he was super efficient, and he's still got Andrew Harris, and they've still got Willie Jefferson and Jackson. And you start to realize whoever doesn't make the playoffs in the West deserves to make the playoffs in the West. Like, there's not a single roster that I'm looking at here going into training camp where I'm saying, yeah, that's that team. I mean, Ottawa, you can make the argument in the East is like, they should probably be towards the back end, but I don't see a team in the West that deserves to be, winning 25% of their games, 3-4 games, something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's right. And you're right about Zach. He's the kind of guy that you just, he just seems to have that ability that wherever he goes, he's successful. If he stays healthy, Winnipeg's going to be in the mix, right? So now all of a sudden, as you said, the whole Western Division, you don't bring it every game. You could start to see how, like with the Lions, they were 0-10 last year against the Western Division. Yeah. You mean it starts to slip on your way really quickly. It's interesting. I wanted to get your take on what happened yesterday in Saskatchewan. Have you ever seen anything like that?
So I actually tweeted out that I had in my first game in university at McMaster, I'll never forget it, man. We were playing against Queens, and I'm 18, 19 years old. I'm still living in Heddon Hall across the street from the football stadium. I haven't even moved into my actual residence yet. I don't know who anybody is on campus. I haven't taken a class yet. And we go into this game after training camp, and I think I was wearing like the Peyton Manning, the old Riddell face mask that had like the weird horseshoe on the front. It was just a weird time in my football life. And I'm standing on the sidelines, and I can't believe that I get to dress as a first-year quarterback as the backup. So I feel super privileged. And then we start the game, and down goes, I believe, Mitch Highway, who was a fifth-year massive senior defensive tackle, ACL. Corey Bai, fullback / linebacker, special teams extraordinaire, ACL. Andrew Soria, defensive back, great speed, super athletic, kind of like a sixth man in the rotation, ACL. First quarter of my first university game, we had 3 ACL tears, and it was the most unbelievable thing because the entire sideline was looking around at each other going, you got to be shitting me. How is this even possible? This doesn't make any sense to have the same injury. Now, that was a game. When you're asking me, have I ever seen anything like what happened in Regina yesterday? The answer is straight up no, because the idea of having that injury, which is a severe injury, like this is a type of injury that I don't wish any slowing down of the careers of any of these guys, especially Larry Dean, because I got so much respect for that dude. But this is the type of injury that really takes away your explosiveness. If you look back through history, who's had this injury, it tends to slow you down a little bit. If you come back from it and you're great, you're kind of against the odds in that sense. So when I saw this go down, the first thing that I thought was, there's no way that that's possible. Like, I thought the reporting was just straight up wrong. And then I listened to Jeremy O'Day's live press conference. And when he said, yeah, it's 4 guys and it's all Achilles and they're all long-term. And you know this from training in football, I went, what exercise could you possibly be doing that would attack Achilles in that way. And it's not that they were trying to do anything nefarious, or I don't think they were trying to push the guys too hard, but it's obvious that because they said it happened, and again, I don't want to read between the lines too much on this, but CSI Regina happening here on the podcast. I'm interested in the idea that they said it happened, just a minute or two apart. It's like, okay, so there was one exercise that they were doing that their legs were they were not prepared for, obviously. And they won't say it. And O'Day said we were trying to ramp up slowly and responsibly, but there was something that they were doing on the field that, even if it didn't seem like they were pushing themselves too hard, it was something that should not have been done based on the fact that it was tough on that part of the body, or they didn't warm up, or I don't know what the hell happened, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. You mean that's exactly the same thing I asked myself is what were they doing? And then when you say like they were minutes apart, like it's clearly one of the exercises was putting a ton of pressure on them. I think it also, it's obviously devastating for Saskatchewan. But I think also it sends a message, I think, to every team. I listened to your interview with Orlando Steinhauer about how he's, gonna attack training camp. And I know that he said something to the effect of, hey, we have a plan. I'm not going to share it with you, but we've discussed it. And I think, though, you made a very good point, is that if you don't take in the advice of your medical team, your trainers, your football people, and that's got to be a collaborative effort, because it's an unprecedented time. Like a lot of these guys have not played football in how long? Year and a half. Yeah. So let's really start to think about what we're putting through them. And the other part of that too, Marshall, is that I think the physical part, but I also think the mental part. I think about here in BC, I was talking to one of the coaches. They've had to quarantine in Kamloops. So a lot of these guys that are coming up here, these imports, are now being put up in residence in Kamloops, British Columbia, which is if anybody's ever been there, it's the desert pretty much. Yeah. I mean, it's dry and hot. And now with all the fires going on, like I could imagine some of those guys I think they were only allowed out of their rooms for 2 15-minute walks in a day. Like, could you imagine? So it's the mental part I also think about, right? Like, what do you do as coaches? How do you approach that? You can't go an entire month of practicing every day and scrimmaging and doing all that. It's going to be a real delicate balance of how teams approach all this, because as I said, it's unprecedented. It's going to be like nothing else you've done before. So the teams, I think, that can really navigate through all this is going to be critical in all of that. You've got to have a really, really strong plan on how to take care of your players, both physically and mentally, to be able to optimize, when the beginning of August comes and you're going to be playing for real.
Yeah, it's a great point that you make about the mental side, because if there's anything that we've learned about mental health and the things that people have gone through, the adversity they've faced throughout the pandemic, it's that, like, there is a lot of things on the surface that you can see. A guy tears his Achilles, he goes down in a heap and he's out for the year. Yeah, that's pain. The frustration of loneliness, like you say, of the American guys coming up and not having family and living through FaceTime and working through meetings. The second you turn off that phone or that Zoom call, it's just you and four walls, man. And like, that's
exactly
tough. That's tough when you're chasing your dreams. So it's a great point. It also reminds me a little bit of, I think it was the Alberta Premier Kenny, who, when the Edmonton bubble was coming up for the NHL, he was like, please come to Edmonton. We'd love to host you for the NHL bubble. And he showed shots of the mountains in Jasper in the video. And I was like, wait a minute. Yeah. I'm like, that's a 4-hour drive west. I've flown into Edmonton. Yeah. I've driven to Jasper. And I love the idea of the BC Lions going to people, Neil McAvoy and other Americans at camps, and going, let me show you the brochure for Vancouver. And then they fly it and they go to Kamloops and they're going, wait a minute, I was shown ocean pictures.
That's so true. That's so true. And for some of those guys, man, it must be like they are on another planet. So like you said, right? Like, we've seen it before where guys come in and they're, they're thinking to themselves, like, how many people are we going to see maybe walk away, say, hey, this isn't worth it. I'm not doing this, right? Like this, it's like I said, it's going to be very, very interesting how teams approach this and how they're going to keep their players engaged and having fun and making it about competitive, being in a competitive environment, and the football part obviously is first and foremost, but the other part of being able to keep them mentally right and having fun and engaged. And they have the opportunities, right? Like, here with no media, they can do all this stuff via web and all that kind of stuff. But, they've got an opportunity to really kind of bond as a team as well and create a real, positive environment. So it'll be interesting to see what Rick Campbell has to say about what he's going to do and how he's going to approach it all, because I think it's a real key factor heading into the season.
Yeah, and the other thing that I took away from the Orlando Steinauer quote that I got from him in that interview was that he said, we want our guys to be healthy, but we also need to be prepared, because being healthy and not being prepared doesn't do us any good when we hit August 5th. And I'm like, well, that's an impossible balance. Like, there's no way to accomplish that until you actually hit the game. And then we're all going to do the hindsight 2020 game where they show up. Any team shows up week 1 and they look awful, we're going to go, oh my God, they weren't prepared at all.
They weren't prepared, yeah.
But look at them. They're so healthy. Or, we could have the Riders where they show up in week 1 against BC and they're incredibly prepared, and we're going, oh, wow, they must have really been pushing. Maybe that's why they had the 4 Achilles.
Exactly right.
We're just going to play hindsight on all of this stuff. So I think reasonable people out there will be willing to just like push back from the table for the next couple of weeks and be like, let's just let them do their work, because they gave them a long training camp to get themselves ready. So before I get you out of here, Giulio, I do want to ask you one more question about the Lions specifically, because I am slightly obsessed with how much I love the linebacking core. Because I'm a huge fan, obviously, of putting Canadians at spots the Canadians don't typically get to play. And sometimes that is middle linebacker. And sometimes that's, Corey Greenwood comes in and he gets to be middle linebacker, and maybe you give him a Fraser Sopik or a backup that's, a young guy, a developmental guy. Very rarely do you see number 1 draft pick, guy that I think could have been in any draft class in the last 5 years, a number 1 draft pick, to be honest, in Jordan Williams. And then you follow that up with an excellent draft pick that is a depth guy in Ben Vladeck out of UBC. I thought he was going to go in the first round. He falls into the early 20s. They still get him. They add depth in that spot. You get Bo Locumbo coming over. Like, it's the whole design of that linebacking group, and just how many Maple Leaf flags there are in that depth chart at linebacker. I find it so intriguing the way they've designed this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that you look at also, guys like Isaiah Guselak-Messam, who had a great campaign with Rich Stubler at that weak side. And Rich like I know Rich. He's been around the league. You don't play at that position unless you know what you're doing. And he did a very, very good job. And like now you say, you throw in Bo Locumbo, you throw Adam Konar, who's had a tremendous amount of time to get himself healthy and ready to go, because he's a good football player. But Jordan Williams obviously is a guy that I'm very, very intrigued with. Every person that I talk to tells me the same thing. Like, this guy's going to be a dominant force. He can go from sideline to sideline. So I really like the way that linebacking that core looks as it is right now. And as you said, anytime that it looks like they're going to pencil 2 Canadians in at that spot, right? So they're going to be, I think, very talented and deep. They're going to have guys that are going to be able to do. You mean they've got enough guys that can play both those spots, hopefully, that can come in and rotate through and in different packages, and hopefully give them the kind of depth that they need. Because as well as anybody that if you're going to start a Canadian, you got to have depth, right? If you're going to adjust the ratio to make sure that you're going to play with a Canadian, you've got to make sure that if anything happens to him, you got a guy who can step right in. I think they feel pretty good about what they have at that position.
Yeah, and I would say as well, Guselak-Messam, when he was coming out, there were people from Laurier who were just screaming at me in the draft analysis going, have you actually watched any of our games? Do you have any idea how good this guy is? And I was like, I watched. I think he's pretty good. And then sure enough, he gets the CFL, and I went, oh no, I underrated him. That was my bad. I should have liked him more. There's always a couple of guys that jump out like that
sure.
When they get to the CFL, they really come to life for you on tape. And he was definitely one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just impressed. Like, as I said, like I used to talk to Rich all the time, and I know how much emphasis he puts on his defensive guys to be able to make reads, to understand the concepts of what an offense is trying to do and how to make those reads and adjustments on the fly. And man, oh man, he was outstanding. He quietly went about his business, and he's one of those guys that you kind of look at the end of the year and you look at statistically and think, God, this guy had a good year, and he just didn't get the kind of hype that a lot of other guys did. But I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the table again. I mean, obviously it's a new system, and it'll be interesting to see if that system fits what he's good at, But again, I just think that he's one of those guys that, from a depth perspective, is going to be, in a really good battle, and that's always a good place to be.
I have a feeling that we're not done with them, but fingers crossed, Giulio, that we are done with the shocking injuries and retirements as we head into the training camps here. As people, when they're listening to this, they'll be through the first couple of days of training camps, and by now there might be all sorts of news of people deciding that it's not right for them or otherwise. But the one thing I do know is please don't ask Giulio or I to do box jumps or deadlifts or sprints because we will tear Achilles simultaneously.
Something bad will happen. Something bad will happen.
I was going to say the bilateral Achilles tear at the same time. Both of us popping both of them at the same time would not be great. But it's great to catch up with you, man. And I know it's going to be an exciting year for you guys as well. Let people know where they can find you this year, because the deal just got announced for you to go out there and do your thing.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody, we can be heard on this Chorus radio network, or Chorus. We're going to be on AM 730. So we're really excited about the deal. It's something that has been in the works for a while. So we're going to be on the radio, and I know a lot of fans have reached out. They're really excited about it. We're excited about it. And most importantly, we're going to be able to do what we love to do, right? I don't have to tell you that, but, I've been doing this a long time. I love the game, and to be able to do this game on the radio and be heard throughout the Lower Mainland and throughout British Columbia is good for the football team. And it's great for us because we get to continue to do what we love.
Awesome. Congratulations, man. I'm looking forward to catching up with you in person soon.
Absolutely. Likewise, Marshall. I appreciate it.